Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2022 Transport Innovation Panel. I'd like to say a big thank you for all of you taking the time to come today and take part in this event. Big thank you to our audience here and also everyone who's joining us on Zoom, and of course our speakers and panel members. Some of you who are part of the TRIG community may have spotted the timing and the cast list and thought that we might be launching TRIG 2022 today. I'm afraid that's not the case, but we do hope that we will be able to very soon. But we'll have to confirm that in time. Most of you will know, hopefully, Sarah Sharples, who's both the Professor of Human Factors at Nottingham University and also for us at DFT, our Chief Scientific Advisor. I'm going to hand over to her in just one moment to say a few words. But as hopefully you know, Sarah is a massive champion for technology of all types and a big advocate within DFT for doing more with technology and doing it better. So basically, she goes out and bats for all of us day in, day out. I'm not going to take up any more time. I'm going to hand over to Sarah.
Thank you very much. And it's a real pleasure to be here today to see you all, to hear a bit more about the TRIG programme and to talk to you a little bit more about the work that we support and deliver through the Department for Transport. So as James has explained, I'm the Chief Scientific Advisor for the Department for Transport. The role of the Chief Scientific Advisor is a really exciting and interesting role. And it's a job that combines the responsibility to provide independent challenge to the department, but also to work with the department in order to help it deliver the really important priorities that we have for transport and innovation within the UK today. So it's really exciting to have the opportunity today to speak to and hear from innovators who are out there creating brand new solutions for the challenges that we all know we face within our transport systems. One of the most important things as a Chief Scientific Advisor, quite difficult for someone as talkative as me, is to listen. And so I'd encourage all of you, and I will make sure I follow my own advice, and make sure we listen to the views of innovators, the challenges they face, and think through, therefore, how the Department for Transport, in partnership with organisations like the Connected Places Catapult, can really help solve some of these challenges we face. I should have said as well that this programme has huge support from our second Permanent Secretary, Gareth Davis, and also our Minister within the department who takes responsibility for science, R&D and the future of transport, Minister Lucy Fraser. They both send their sincere apologies for not being able to join today, but I can absolutely assure you they both support this programme with real strong vigour. So I want to spend a few moments just talking about how important it is to consider science, engineering, innovation and technology when we're considering the way that we can deliver and develop our future transport systems. I'm also really keen that we understand how to balance the needs of our transport systems with economic prosperity. We know that one of the opportunities we have within the UK is we're a fantastic knowledge economy. We are brilliant at coming up with really good ideas that genuinely solve some of those big problems that we all face. But what we need to do is take those ideas and pull them through into real solutions that are used within our transport system. That's why we have programmes like TRIG. That's why we have organisations like the Connected Places Catapult. So thinking really strongly, not only about the excitement of science, engineering, innovation and technology, but also the opportunity for economic prosperity is really important for us to be aware of. So we face huge challenges in the future of our transport system. We know that we have an urgent need to decarbonise as quickly and efficiently as possible. We're also witnessing the impact of a number of external factors on our transport system. We've seen significant changes to working patterns in the light of COVID, but we also know that we're facing many challenges around cost of living, and those challenges are affecting people's choice and decision-making about many aspects of their life, including the way they choose to travel. It's only by working together between government, academia, industry and innovators that we can harness the opportunities that we have for making sure that we have an energetic and impactful innovation sector in the UK, delivering these solutions for our transport system. So that's the challenge that we all face together. The pace of technological and scientific progress presents boundless opportunity for us. But how do we make sure that we make the most of that opportunity? Science and innovation is absolutely key to unlocking the Department for Transport's aspirations for the future. And we've got a number of flagship programmes that really demonstrate our commitment to supporting those aspirations. Eamon, my colleague, is here and we'll be able to talk about UK Shore. UK Shore is a new programme that really will transform the UK into a global leader in clean maritime technology, not only influencing policy and regulation, but delivering new technological solutions. If we're going to decarbonise the maritime sector, we need to work now. Vessels stay in the sea and in the oceans for a very, very long time. The vessels that are there now will still be there in 2050 when we need to be meeting our net zero targets. So we need to really, really urgently tackle the decarbonisation of maritime technology. We also support the Jet Zero strategy from the department. And that strategy aims to deliver net zero aviation by 2050 through technological advances, working in partnership with the aviation industry. We've recently launched our zero-emission road freight demonstrators. These are multi-million-pound demonstrators, and they aim to provide us with the evidence that will enable us to deliver the policy that helps us on the pathway to zero-emission heavy goods vehicles. And we have the Tees Valley Hydrogen Transport Hub. That brings together a range of different modes and a range of different requirements for hydrogen to really aim to test at scale what a multimodal, low-carbon hydrogen transport system looks like in practice. And then more recently, I've done an awful lot of work with our Centre for Connected and Autonomous Vehicles. This is a programme that's been in place since 2015 and has worked with research, business and local government to enable the autonomy on our streets. And I think it's an excellent example of long-term investment in R&D that's had a real impact on the external ecosystem. One of the most impressive statistics about the connected and autonomous vehicles work is that out of £300 million government investment, we've directly leveraged £400 million from industry. And so far, 35 of the companies that have been supported through CCAV have already raised 790 million through private investment. So that's a real illustration of how a relatively small amount of investment from government can lead to true economic prosperity. So when I joined the department, I was asked to really bring R&D and science into the heart of the department. And I'd like to really sort of make sure that you recognise the Department for Transport as being a true research and development department. But I've talked about the big things. And actually, all of these initiatives start with smaller things. And this is where our transport research and innovation grants come in, and we know them as TRIG. And when I joined the department, I was actually really excited to learn about TRIG. Over the lifetime so far of the programme, 294 projects in total have been funded, and that represents over £10 million of direct investment from the department. Now, not all of those projects will have succeeded, and that's okay. That's why we take a portfolio approach to programmes such as TRIG, because actually we know that it can be just as valuable to try something and recognise what doesn't work and stop and move that talent onto other parts of the problems within the transport system, as it can to take those initiatives forward and help them to deliver real impact in our transport system. Now, I think probably my reputation precedes me, but it feels like almost every meeting I went into for the first 6 months, my question was, where's the evidence of the impact? How do we know that what we've done here has made a difference? And I've got two really good examples from TRIG just to share with you. And I don't know actually if any of the individuals are here today. So a company called Vivacity that some of you may well be aware of developed some smart cameras to identify and measure the different road uses and road users. What we now see, after the initial funding that they got through one of our TRIG programs, is that they now employ over 100 people, and those cameras are used by local authorities all over the UK. So we can trace the development of that technology from a relatively small investment through our TRIG program into real impact on the transport systems that we see. Another example is Lens Labs. This is a technology that's still developing, and an organisation that was formed by 3 graduates from the University of Edinburgh. They came up with a new magnetic traction concept to help trains deal with leaves and snow. And we know that this is one of those, perhaps unexciting, although I think it's exciting, challenges that we have to deal with within our transport system. Coming up with practical solutions to help the resilience of our transport system is extremely important. And I'm really pleased to learn that Lens Labs, just this year, have secured £1 million in seed funding. So we can see that that progress of that technology through the technology readiness levels is there for us all to understand. So I really look forward to today's discussion. The purpose of today's discussion is to excite you about TRIG and help you understand how we can better support the transport innovation sector. I'd be really, really keen to emphasise to you, though, that this isn't just about the forthcoming TRIG projects. This is also about the projects that we funded this year and the ones last year and the ones before that and the ones before that, because they're all part of our wider system. And actually our job is to spot those connections, spot those opportunities between different types of contexts. Because some of those technologies that are developed may well have needs that even the innovators themselves are not necessarily aware of in other parts of our transport system. So TRIG is a key vehicle for the Department for Transport to support transport innovators, and it's part of our regular rhythm of funding within the department. So please do keep an eye on the TRIG program, the TRIG pages that are hosted on the Connected Places Catapult website, and we will make sure that as soon as we're able to, we can give you details about the announcements for this year's TRIG. So thank you all very much. And I really look forward to listening and contributing to our discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I'm sure you'll all join me in thanking Sarah for that exciting trip through the breadth and the depth of transport innovation, and of course the vibrancy that we see in all the different technologies and application areas that exist within it. Next up, I'm going to introduce Eamon Byrne, who Sarah mentioned earlier, and also Alex Whedon. So Eamon is in charge of the maritime decarbonisation technology effort in DFT UK Shore, and he's gonna say a few words, and then we'll hear from Alex. So Eamon, over to you.
Hi everybody, can you hear me through this? Is this coming through okay? Can you all hear me? Hi, okay. I wasn't quite prepared to say a few words, but I will do. So I'll just do that. That's okay. I'm learning from our political masters on how to wing it. What would I say? I find this really exciting. So I've been in the department now for 20 odd years or so, and most of my work has been on either emerging technologies or decarbonising the sector. I've worked in aviation and maritime now, and I used to work in what was OLEV and is now OZEV. And I find it quite fascinating about the opportunity, and we're kind of focused always on the decarbonisation outputs and things like that. And that they tend to be the driver, certainly the work that we're doing in UK Shore, where we have 206 million. But actually what we're being asked to do is think about much broader on that, and what is the opportunity for the UK in kind of growth of the maritime sector in terms of jobs and export potential, and how can we seize those opportunities and become kind of global leaders. And one of the things that we're trying to do in UK Shore, the Shipping Office for Reducing Emissions, you can understand why we shortened it, is to try and hit all of those TRL levels. And try and create a pipeline of projects that really drive the technological development in order to decarbonise the sector. But we've got to work with our shipbuilding colleagues in the National Shipbuilding Office. We've got to work with BAYS and others when it comes, and DIT as well when it comes to trade. Because we're really being pushed to think about not just can we fund this technology in order to decarbonise, but where are the benefits and everything else. And that comes through to, I think, what Sarah was talking about there. So what are we doing in UK Shore? Working with James and Sarah on how do our programmes fit with TRIG. We work with BAYS and colleagues in the department on how our programmes fit within other transport R&D and wider net zero transport R&D. We have a delivery partner in Innovate UK on one of our flagship projects, which is a programme which is called the Clean Maritime Demonstration Competition, and that's hitting the sort of middle to higher end of TRL and trying to accelerate some of those projects to commercialisation. So it's really exciting. And I was in Grimsby yesterday, which doesn't sound exciting, but I was in Grimsby yesterday, and we were talking about the vessels that maintain all the wind farms up in the North Sea, and they carry crews there and maintenance crews and things like that. And those vessels are, at the moment, like most ships, running on diesel. And there's a real opportunity there to decarbonise them and make them zero emission. And that feels like really close to commercialisation. So we're funding quite a few little projects, and some of them are really quite innovative. So in some respects, some of these vessels are just glorified taxis, but they hang around at these wind turbines for like 6, 7, 8, sometimes 10, 15 hours. While the crew are working on that. And some of these projects are thinking about, well, how can we actually plug into the turbine? You know, how do we do that? And they've got all these models about how, well, the cable, if it's going to be this long, and what kind of swell are we able to, you know, and they're looking at all these. And these are, I think the thing for me is that we kind of know that electricity and hydrogen and ammonia are all going to play a part in shipping. But it's the little tricky questions like that we really need some innovative thinking on, that programmes like this and UK Shore are really important for. So I think I'll stop there because I could go on for hours. But yeah, happy to join you today. Brilliant.
Thank you very much, Eamon, and for an ambush. That was absolutely brilliant. I know if I'm ever caught in a tight spot, who I'll call. So next up, we've got Alex Whedon, who those from CPC will know very well. Exec Director for SME Development and Academic Engagement. And he's going to say a few words to us as well. Alex.
Thank you, James. I have to steal your microphone, I'm afraid. I'm not all wired up. Well, firstly, it's always a pleasure to welcome our friends from the DFT to Connected Places Catapult. It's wonderful to be here. Wonderful to have you here. And I'd like to offer my thanks to the SciTech team and Sarah and all the other parts of the DFT that actually make the TRIG programme what it is. And I think it's hard to underestimate how difficult it is for transport innovation to find a route to market. Not just because of barriers like procurement and regulation. And I make that sound like it's a bad thing. You know, regulation's there for a purpose. It's there to ensure safety. It's there to ensure standards. But it's actually a real challenge for innovators right at the beginning of their journey, just to get great ideas off the ground. And that's why I think TRIGs are so important. They plug that gap in the route to market. Sarah talked about joining all the different parts of the ecosystem together to move things from an idea all the way through to market. And TRIGs plug a really important gap in that. I worked for a long time in the biomedical sphere, and while the technology is hard in that area, actually the route to market, everybody knows what it is. But we don't have that. If you're talking about the future of air mobility or new fuels, or you're talking about using data. Or if we're talking about using drones in a particular way on, you know, for monitoring infrastructure and all of that kind of thing, that stuff doesn't exist yet. There's no route to market for that. And especially if you're a small business, that's really, really hard to navigate. But getting that first proof of concept, getting that first understanding of what you can achieve is what the TRIGs are really, really good for and play a really important role in that. And Connected Places Catapult is really proud to bring our networks and the skills, of course, that we have within the organisation to bear in helping to identify innovators like you that can deliver meaningful projects, and of course the impact that Sarah talked about that's so important to why we do these things. And it's all about supporting that journey to commercialisation. So whether you're a university researcher, a micro SME, or even a larger SME that's got a new idea and wants to develop a new product or service, TRIGs can play a really important role in that development. And while we work with innovators in TRIG as a programme, that's not the only way that we can work with you. Join our network to get access to other commercial and CR&D opportunities. The Innovate UK Edge funding programme, for example, accelerators, or even opportunities from other accelerators, other companies, including other catapults. They do exist and we do work with them. So, we can help point you in the right direction if you need the right expertise that we don't have in-house. And of course, once TRIG comes to an end and your journey on TRIG has come to an end, we want you to continue to be part of that network. We want to keep in touch with you and keep supporting you through your journey. So on behalf of Connected Places Catapult, thank you all for coming. And I hope you will enjoy stimulating discussions that today will spark, and let's get trigger happy. Thank you, James.
Thank you very much, Alex. And I like trigger happy. I'm gonna steal that and keep that for my own. So we're now going to move to the first of our two panel discussions. But just before we do, I think I'd like to highlight one of the things that I think all of our speakers have touched upon, and that's the sort of integrated and continuous support. And I think that's really, really important. Something that we think is really important in the in SciTech in DFT, because if you have that, that's what then gives you the robust pipeline of new solutions that are constantly coming through, and that's what then gives you growth. And I think you've seen the narrative in government pivot to growth, and I think the various things that have gone on today and over the last few days. But that will endure, that need, that desire, that strategic goal of driving growth with innovation. So yeah, important to bear in mind. So now I'd like to welcome our panelists for today. So if you'd like to come up to stage, that'd be great. I'd also like to welcome back Eamon and Sarah to the stage, if that's all right. And then we'll ask our panelists to introduce themselves. Right. So I think you're all primed to say something. And I think, James, you're going to go first? So you need to press the button to make it go.
Is that working? Is that working? Well, thanks ever so much for having me here today. I'm James Thomas, the CEO of Jet Engineering. So it's absolutely fantastic to be part of such a fantastic event. The Connected Places Catapult has been really good for us and really supportive of us on our journey through TRIG as we've scaled the business. And just really, really thankful for having us on the panel today.
Well, that's right.
Does this one works? My name's Will Maiden. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Morales Data. We were an old TRIG recipient, and yeah, from 2019, which has been, and we've grown quite a lot since then. Yeah, I'm very grateful to be here today, and thanks for the support over the years.
Thanks, Will. Tanya?
Is that working?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so my name is Sonia. I'm a Senior Lecturer and Director of Employability at School of Sustainability, Civil and Environmental Engineering, so a bit of mouthful. We are also very grateful to be here and be invited.
Have you lost it?
And we're a member of the TRIG 2021 cohort, and very grateful for the support that we've received, which is not just funding, but actually quite multi-dimensional support. Thank you very much for having us here.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you for joining us. Right, we're going to move to our first panel session now. We're going to be discussing SME-driven growth. And I'd like to, the first question is going to be directed to our government government panelists here. Excuse me. And can you maybe start us off talking about what are the challenges that we have with engaging with the wider transport sector as government?
So I'm happy to just provide a bit of an overview of my experience over the last year and a half, actually. I think one of the biggest challenges that we've identified is simply the breadth of actors within the transport ecosystem. Some of the major players, the sort of multi-billion-pound corporations, are obvious to us all, but actually where we see some of the true innovation and the different thinking coming through is from really small organisations like we see represented here today that may be 1, 2, 3, 4 people. And so simply grasping that breadth of opportunity, I think, is really, really challenging. But actually, one of the things I'm extremely keen on is that we bring new actors and new types of SMEs into solving some of the problems we have within the transport system. I got a train set for my 5th birthday, and so I've always loved transport. But very sadly, not all of the population share my passion for the sector of transport. And in my work as an academic at the University of Nottingham in both engineering, but also computer science, and I work with business schools and other things like this, you get students who get excited about Formula One, and actually they get excited about renewable technologies. But I really struggled to get students excited about trains. And I really struggled sometimes to get students excited about sort of whole transport systems. And so what we, I think, really need to do is to demonstrate more broadly the breadth of opportunity and excitement of transport as a sector, because we need technologies and companies who are working in new communications technologies or new methods of developing algorithms to help us interpret computer vision images, or new solutions to bring together really complex data sets in order to deliver new solutions for end-to-end journeys. We need them to be working in the transport sector, and actually we're competing against lots of different industries. So they're just 3 of the many challenges that I think we face.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Would any of our SMEs like to, our innovators, sorry, like to come in and say something about just general challenges? James.
I think it's been really exciting for us to see this. And you mentioned something which is fantastic. I think when we started and applied for TRIG, we were 4 heads. I think we're now 16. And it's that whole growth that's possible through investing in SME innovation. And we're working on connectivity. We're trying to build comms for wind farms, so you build them more efficiently, so you can do things like drones, as you mentioned, for wind farms. All those enabling technologies still need to be built, and that whole tiny starting point is where we've come to the point now where actually having enabled that, we've got things like we've got a contract with Scottish Power Renewables now, and you're going, actually, a year ago we had 4 heads, and now we've got major contracts. We've now got this ability to really scale that vision thanks to the support of programs such as this.
Thanks, James. Anyone else like to come in and talk about some general challenges?
I was just going to say, I think I was probably the person that was inspired by the train set, because that was my solution, is to sort of make transport systems work together. But yeah, just to echo James's, we were, I think, 5 people when we got the TRIG funding, and we're now 49. So yeah, without it, we wouldn't be here. So yeah.
Not to put you on the spot, Donia, but being in a slightly different position from James and Will, and being in the academic sector and looking out, how do you see the challenges in transport innovation?
I mean, there are multidimensional challenges from academic point of view, but the first one, and for our work, data and information was key. We wouldn't have been here if it wasn't for the in-kind support from Network Rail providing data and information that we needed. We didn't want to generate new data. I think we have far more data that we should have. But it's about adding value to what actually exists, adding wisdom and action to the data that already exists, and what we wanted to do with this innovation, really. Beyond the data and information, and I think that it's very actually key, is with any innovation, you actually need to have interactions with end users and stakeholders. It's very easy to sit and make unvalidated assumptions about how the innovation could be used, how it would impact someone else's day-to-day business. So we found that element really, really key for our work. So again, very grateful to have that resource and kind of support to be able to interact with our potential direct end users. I mean, but also, as Sarah just mentioned, I think there is a huge problem with not only the education, the reskilling, upskilling, and actually the skill set that's need to keep up with the way that innovation is going, is progressing. And I don't think in the academia we're doing enough in that regard. So sorry, that long answer to your question.
No, that's great. Thank you. I think it's one big integrated ecosystem, isn't it? And that's certainly something we want to support. So I think a question again for our government panelists. Do you want to say something about how government is planning to, or maybe should, support SMEs and grassroots innovation? Do you think there's more we should be doing, perhaps? Who'd like to start?
Do you want to start with the clean maritime, and then I'll...
I think it's really easy for us, and this touches on the last question as well, for government to engage with the big incumbents, because they're there, they've been there for decades, we know how to engage with them, they know how the system works, it's really easy. What's sort of quite exciting that I've seen over the past decade or so, certainly, is that we're seeing new entrants to those transport areas, those modes but not from people that are aviators or not from people that, they are system developers or software developers. And a lot of when I was working in drones and unmanned aviation systems, it was all, a lot of those guys that were joining the aviation world weren't aviators. They were, software developers. And it was really exciting, but really quite challenging, because for DFT, we hadn't engaged with that sector before. We didn't, and so working with the catapults and CPC and reaching out to them, I think is quite has been really good for that. And then what I've seen gradually over the years is that is where those big incumbents are starting to wake up and are actually now working with the smaller companies that are not from aviation or not from maritime. And I think that's really exciting. It's how do we build on that and keep that going and make that grow. And we can't, I don't think DFT we can do it alone. And I think there's which is why CPC, for example, is really important. But, so a bit of a rambling answer there.
No. I think really important that linking the big and the small, because we know that a lot of the really innovative ideas come out of smaller organizations, and it's the bigger, sort of less agile organizations that struggle to innovate in the same way. They're less agile. And so you need that link, you need that transfer of ideas. Would anyone else like to build on that theme of big working with small?
I think one of the we've been applied for many grants over the years, and actually we've been working with some very large companies, and some of those large companies, as you rightly say, lack the innovation sort of spark because they're now too big. But there's a sort of political, as you rightly said, that it's very easy to work with those companies because they know how to work with you. And I think that just that one touch of maybe teaching SMEs how to work with you is probably the one bit that's missing. We learned it, we did very well. So, but I think it's that bit that would probably help as well.
And it's really interesting that you say that, actually, because one of the things I feel very strongly about is that success of delivering research funding is not just about getting money out of the door. It's about the wraparound support that's provided. And I've actually done this in my own academic work, and I was really pleased to see how the TRIG programme and then other programmes like the HS2 Accelerator programme, the Accelerator programmes that are delivered here. And actually very often it's that non-financial support that can be just as valuable and impactful to the SMEs as it is the financial support. If I take another example, the Industrial Strategies Challenge Fund Future Flight programme has created a massive ecosystem of people working in drones technology. And I know that previously we've had TRIG programmes focused on drones technologies as well. And the great thing about SMEs is that actually, because they've usually got quite a niche sort of opportunity that they've identified, there are real opportunities for SMEs to work with each other as well. And so getting that sort of pre-competitive collaboration coming through, I think is really, really important.
Yeah. Would anyone else like to add? Eamon?
Can I add to this?
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say regulators are really important in this room as well. I think just thinking back to aviation again, the CAA years ago built an innovation hub, recognising that they're now working with people from outside the sector who are innovating in aviation. I'll leave it up to others whether that's working or not, but at least, there's a recognition within regulators as well that they are equally important when it comes to innovation in the sector. It's not just R&D funding, it's regulation and it's legislation, etc.
Yeah. And responsible innovation. I think that's where the regulators come in. Donia, I'll let you come in, and then James.
Yeah, no, just a quick one. And I think, dare I say, we are by nature a very risk-averse and conservative industry, and which it's sometimes quite rightly so. But I think there is a fine line between lack of willingness to change anything just because we've done things the way we've done it and it works and history proves nothing, and also not doing innovation for the sake of the innovation, but actually offering something that it actually truly makes a difference. I think that line in terms of, especially with the high risk projects, innovations through programs like TRIG has been instrumental and transformative for those high risk projects, which was one of our project was certainly a high risk project. And one of the ways that we could take it to the next level, just that one extra step, just to demonstrate that actually works, that this problem matters and the solutions that we are offering actually works, is through a funding, a sort of support like this that helped us to take the TRL2-1 to TRL4 and actually kind of a stepping stone for the follow-up works.
Thanks, Donia. I think there was a hint of mission-led innovation in there, and we actually we had Mariana Mazzucato speak to us in the summer, which was brilliant for those who know her. James,
I'd love to add to that slightly. It was that ability for us to take something as a concept to the regulators, to industry, to the big companies, and say, actually, this can exist. We might have got to TRL5, TRL6 for some of the proposition, but actually, here's what the world would look like. And having that twofold piece, the ability to work with those regulators and be involved in them, is opened doors around 5 or 6 other projects for us, because they've all gone, we could use this and that innovation and that link between it's only become possible when you have funding with partners such as the DFT involved.
Thanks, James. Can I move us just a half step along onto growth? Because part of this session was supposed to be about growth, and I think it's a topic very close to Connected Places Catapult's heart, obviously, because it's here to help good innovation get to market and hence drive growth. What more could we be doing in transport to not just be doing innovation to improve the transport system, but also to drive growth? What could we change?
The biggest challenge we found is capital investment. The maritime sector where we're working is massively capital intensive, and it's the desire for the city to invest in capital intensive infrastructure and projects, and that's a real big barrier for entry at the moment for us. Once we've got scale, you can obviously move into asset funding, receivable funding. There's multiple mechanisms, but that as a startup is almost inaccessible until you get to a scale. There needs to be a way to start to break down those barriers.
So James, if I could just get you to expand a little bit, is that sort of VC area, or is that pre
So VCs generally at the moment are looking at mainly SaaS businesses. They're looking at recurring revenues. They're not really interested in long-term plays. They're very interested in the here and now, the flash to bang. And we've seen it, there's a lot of apps that are being generated. So this doesn't affect transport at all. It's I want to pay on an app, and that's going to make them a lot of money very quickly. And then there'll be another one that comes along, but the VC is going to see its return really quickly. Whereas transport as a sector doesn't get that. We're going to go and build electric ferries that are going to last 30 years, or we're going to go and build infrastructure for wind farms that's going to last 30 years, or charging points for wind farms, whatever the technology happens to be. But if we put a charging point in every wind farm, we need 50, hundreds of millions of investment on those wind farms. Where's that going to come from is the challenge at the moment.
So it's patient capital.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would anyone else like to come in on growth?
So in terms of money, we are a SaaS business, so we were fine. I think it is that level of funding and next level. I think what programs like TRIG do brilliantly is they give you that ability to get to a certain point. And there is the support to keep going. That, I mean, you guys have been support for over the year, so I've got no complaints there at all. But there is that point at which the project ends, and actually taking it further, that little step there was the trickiest bit for us in terms of growth. And I'll be honest, we sidelined our TRIG project for a while only for a while, and then we could raise money internally to pick it up again. And now it's flying brilliantly. So yeah, it's that little small awkward step once a project is completed. But.
Thanks, Will. Any last contributions or anyone? Go on, Eamon.
Yeah, one thing I've been thinking about is how does R&D and the support the government gives to that, what is the link between that and policy and the role of policy and regulation when it comes to growth and continuing those projects and getting that capital investment. And I like the term patient capital, I like that. For me in maritime, what we're thinking about is how do we give indicative targets to certain subsectors, for example? So, I don't know, don't quote this, but something like 2032, all certain types of vessels doing certain types of operations have to be zero emission, for example. We can only do that on the back of the evidence that the R&D gives us that the technology is going to be there in place. But by putting that policy signal out there, that in the UK this will be the case, then provides some of the certainty that I think that the investors are then looking for, that then hopefully go allow them to then invest. But I don't think we need to make those links between policy, regulation and R&D and everything else. And I hope that goes to somewhere, but there's a fascinating discussion.
How do we connect the dots though? Because we've got a project with a university in the north looking at emissions. So we're planning on putting emissions profiling on our platforms. And then the hope is that we can identify which ships are the worst emitters. Really powerful piece of tool then to go, actually, we've got an AIS linked to blah, blah, blah. Nothing special really in terms of the tech, but actually it would enable us to drive, actually are people being regulated? Are they actually doing what they should be doing, or are they just using dirty diesel all around the world until they get to the English Channel? Where is that line and how do we regulate that now knowing that the tech can exist?
Good question. I don't have an answer. I mean, this is partly what we're kind of struggling with at the moment.
But actually, I think it demonstrates why conversations like this are so important. Yeah. So I came to this role after 25 years working in the academic sector, working with rail, working with highways, working in air traffic control. And I'd only scraped the surface of the complexity. And I hadn't really understood, as someone external to government, what the potential levers that policy and regulation bring are. So I think that actually conversations between the different actors in the system are also really, really helpful. I've actually seen a play in the Department for Transport, and actually we were in a meeting this morning where we were talking about this very issue, where I've noticed that the skill of my colleagues in the Department for Transport are listening to a conversation that I might be having with someone about future technology capability, and them thinking, right, this is the potential policy lever that could be brought into place. So having those conversations, and one of the things that Eamon and I and many others in the department have worked on since I've joined, is having a much closer partnership between the people like us, James and Rosie, who are working on the science, technology and innovation side of things, and the people who are delivering the policy. Because one of the dangers in a government department is there's an awful lot going on. And there's an awful lot of day-to-day business to be done, and taking the time to step back and thinking about what the opportunities are and listening to the perspectives of the expertise that we all bring within the system, I think is really, really important. And I really welcome the opportunity today, because I probably don't spend enough time speaking to SMEs and recognizing those very, very subtle but important barriers that we need to then think about how we can help overcome. And the last thing I'll just say is, of course, Department for Transport funding is a teeny tiny proportion of the overall government funding that's out there. If we think about the overall 2.4% of R&D being funded, so 2.4% of gross domestic product is now roughly what's spent on R&D in the UK. Government funding is only a quarter of that. The vast majority of government funding sits in departments like BEIS, DHSC, and MOD. So actually making sure we're not only leveraging the funding that's coming from BEIS through their specialist institutes, Innovate UK and other organisations, but also that 3/4 of that pot that's coming from industry. And thinking about how we enable SMEs to partner with major industry players as well, I think is a really important opportunity.
Yeah, and I think that might be where I draw this panel session to a close. But I think, yes, some really, really important and insightful views and takes on transport innovation there. And I think the one thing that we've all highlighted is how much work Sarah and I and the rest of the team have got to do joining up all the different bits of the puzzle to make sure they work well together. So we're going to take a short break now for 10 minutes, and I'm going to give the panel a chance to stretch their legs and have some refreshments. We're then going to come back at 3 o'clock, and we're going to have some awards, which will be very nice. And then we will have our second panel discussion, which will look at decarbonisation in greater detail. So I will see you in 10 minutes. Thank you.
When I think back to
this is my well, I have to say, it's really brilliant to hear just those stories. You see them written down on a piece of paper. It's not what you say. This is how we make sure that comes back this sort of project in the long-term future. Because I was trying to get your attention. Say that. That was really good.
to stretch their legs. We're going to start with our 2022 TRIG Awards. And without more to do, I'm going to hand over to Sarah. Sarah.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, you'll be very bored of me by the end of today, but I'm really, really pleased to be able to spend a few minutes talking about the Chief Scientific Advisor Awards that we're making to the TRIG 2021 cohort today at the TRIG 2022 event. Really, just to give a bit of background as to why we even have awards in the first place, I think that it's really important to recognise that every project that's funded within TRIG has done something really important. As I mentioned before, we don't expect every project in TRIG to lead technologies that are directly used within the transport system. But we do know that a significant proportion of those projects do lead to future success for those organisations. And by highlighting some of the very best projects amongst the TRIG cohorts, we hope that we can inspire the TRIG community of the future. It's also really important to recognise that actually these awards, which I'm afraid don't come with big financial incentives or anything like that, are actually about recognising the opportunities and the diversity of those opportunities within the transport system. So the winners get an opportunity to, you'll be very bored of me by then, but to have a direct conversation with me. And actually that's really, really helpful for me to delve into the opportunities that each project presents. I'd love to be able to spend time with all, is it 54 or 53 or 55 projects? 51, with all 51 projects. But sadly, there aren't enough hours in the week for me to do that. So having those opportunity to, oh look, it's written down here, 51 as well. Having the opportunity to just spend those longer conversations with the teams is really, really valuable. But I really want to take this opportunity to congratulate all of the TRIG recipients on their fantastic work and the really good contributions that they've made. We know that TRIG directly not only contributes to the health of the SMEs, and we heard some really powerful examples of that earlier today, but actually is making our transport system better. It's reducing the environmental impact of transport. It's improving the experience of transport for the people who are travelling on our transport systems every day. And it's also helping to grow and level up the economy and improve our international profile and opportunity. So thank you to all of you for the brilliant work that you've been doing as part of the TRIG cohort. And I think, it doesn't say this on my piece of paper, but I think we should give everyone a round of applause just for all of their work. So, I'm very pleased to make the award, first of all, to our future leader. And this is an award that really those who've been involved in delivering the TRIG programme really felt very strongly about, because one of the things we know that comes from TRIG is that persistence, that confidence, that reflective capability, that enthusiasm, that team working that we know is so important for delivering leadership in all parts of our transport research and development ecosystem. So the winner of the Future Leader Award is Robert Quinn, who's the Chief Executive of Make Sense Technologies. Now, Make Sense used TRIG funding to develop a device that can help people with visual impairments navigate their surroundings. The device is a unique human-machine interface, and it communicates 3D spatial information about the local environment non-visually, but takes source data from cameras. So it fuses audio cues and vibration sensations and makes that into an intuitive and straightforward experience of a 3D space. And I know from work that I've been involved in myself over the years with visually impaired participants and colleagues, it's a really, really complex area of design, because we need to understand and work with those who hold particular disabilities in order to really make sure that the technologies we're developing meet those specific needs. So I'm really pleased to see that this project was developed in collaboration with Blind Veterans UK, and they will go on and support large-scale trials. So we previously have had elements of the TRIG programme that have been specifically focused on accessibility, and it's really reassuring to know that actually projects on transport accessibility are coming through the standard TRIG programme. Some of the great success stories that you've heard about today come from early career innovators who were able to take a risk on and then enabled to go on to great things. And everything I hear about Rob is that he's going to go on to great things and be one of those individuals. So the joint DFT and CPC TRIG team nominated Rob for his enthusiastic approach to the project, his passion for helping those with disabilities to access transport, and his fusion of vision and values in the way he interacts. So we think he's really one to watch, and I think I now hand over to Rob for a few words of acceptance.
We should hopefully have Rob coming in.
Everybody, can you see me?
Hi, Rob, we can see you. Well
Hi.
done.
Thank you. Yeah, so I mean, it's an amazing honour to be awarded this out of the whole cohort, which were already filled with so many amazing ideas and inventions. And I just want to say that I don't think if we hadn't won this £30,000 award, that we would be where we are today, because this was all a self-funded project. I put everything I had into this project. And at the point we won the funding, I was pretty much out of cash. But just this £30,000 and 6 months of funding has taken this business from a one-person startup to a company that now has 3 full-time employees. And we've just raised our seed investment round, and we've got a £500,000 research grant. So, I mean, it's something that definitely wouldn't have been possible if we hadn't been lucky enough to win this. So thank you, and thank you for the award as well.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Rob. You know, I'm just going to say, I almost feel a little bit emotional because we do an awful lot of stuff in our jobs. And actually, this is so important just to think about the impact that these bits of money make a difference in. So thanks, Rob, for that really, really great citation.
Thanks.
Brilliant.
Well done.
Okay. Move on to the next one now. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so I'm now going to move on to the Maritime Decarbonisation Award. And this was a particular stream, I think I'm right in saying, of TRIG last year. We've heard quite a lot about maritime today. And do you know what? That's absolutely brilliant, because I think a few years ago, maritime was a little bit of an underlooked element of the whole portfolio of the Department for Transport. And we know that it's absolutely critical that we decarbonise maritime, and there's a real opportunity for us to take UK leadership internationally in this place. So the winner of the Maritime Decarbonisation Award is Malakoff Limited. Now, Malakoff are working towards the production of a fully electric small commercial vessel. And the TRIG project that was funded has already attracted significant interest from the marine sector, and the trial vessel is moving towards technology readiness level 6, so large-scale trialling. The view of the panel is that this project has the potential to decarbonise a small but widespread niche in maritime operations, which is small workboats and water taxis in harbours and on rivers. Now, workboats represent one of the very few niches in which the UK is strong still in terms of boat manufacture. So it's really great to have a project in this space. So to deliver maximal decarbonisation, and actually Eamon gave a really good example of this earlier when he was talking about the challenges of making sure that you could get the sort of attachment between the boats and the wind turbines earlier. We need to think of our whole systems. We need to think of every element within the system if we're going to successfully decarbonise in maritime. And so we really felt that Malakoff Limited represented a real opportunity in this niche area. So I'd like to hand over now. Oh, no, we can't hand over now. I don't know if you've read the news, but they've got a few challenges in Shetland at the moment with communication technology. So I think, James, you've got something on behalf of Malakoff. Is that correct?
That is correct. Unless Ryan turns up, I'm going to accept the award on his behalf. We managed to get him on the phone, and he dictated a few words. So this is from Ryan. Apologies for not being able to join you all due to telecom issues in the Shetland Islands today. Thank you for this award. I would like to thank the Department for Transport and the TRIG team in the Connected Places Catapult for their support and investment in the project. It's really allowed us to kickstart the project and advance the development of small zero-emission vessels. We've had a lot of interest in the project, and we hope it will form the basis for a few different developments that will be ongoing in the next 2 years. There were a lot of great projects in the TRIG programme, so we're truly honoured to receive this recognition. Well done, Ryan.
I was saying that I think there was an award winner from last year, wasn't there, which was how to provide Wi-Fi in remote situations, and actually for mountain rescue, if I remember last year's example. So we need to get them up to the Shetlands so that we can help them out right now. That's a really great project. So I'm now going to move on to an award where actually we decided that there were two worthy winners. And that's the Impactful Freight Award. Now, similarly, the department's been accused of being freight blind in the past. And I have to say that since I've joined the department, I don't think that's a reasonable accusation anymore. We do know that freight is an absolutely essential part of the transport system. We've seen this in sort of stark focus in recent months, where we've seen supply chain challenges. And I think also since the pandemic, we've become much more aware almost of the passage of movement of goods, as well as the movement as people, as part of the transport mission. So the first winner of the Impactful Freight Award is Fishbone Solutions. Fishbone are developing a freight wagon condition management system. And what this does is it provides operators and wagon owners with a remote condition monitoring system that identifies existing or impending component or system failures. And of course, that being able to spot things that are going to happen in the future is an extremely helpful thing to have when you're looking at condition monitoring. So currently, rail freight wagons are very, and it says here, and I agree with this, old school. And typically, they have no electric systems at all. They're purely mechanical. So what this system does is allows retrofitting with simple sensors and data storage to allow you to understand what and how trucks are doing. The retrofitting aspect of this project is really, really valuable because rail assets, as we know, are also not only expensive, but long-lived, especially in freight. And much of the freight system actually remains undisrupted from an innovation point of view. So the panel felt that this is a really small but significant step to digitalising rail freight and potentially transferring that learning into the wider freight system. So I think I can hand over now to Fishbone for a few words of acceptance.
Oh, here we are. They're coming in.
Can you all see me and hear me?
We can. Good afternoon.
Hi, everybody. First of all, I'd just like to say a huge thank you for this award. It's been a real surprise, actually. We've been developing condition monitoring for freight wagons for a number of years now. It's been difficult to get the project off the ground. And our aim's been to just provide the industry with something cost-effective that can enable safety improvements and provide cost of use savings by monitoring the vibrational profile of wagons. Without the support of Connected Places Catapult and the DFT through the TRIG funding, we couldn't have realised the project's potential. So a huge thank you from us all at Fishbone. I'd just like to also give some special thanks to my brilliant teammates. We overcame a number of logistical challenges to make this project happen. We collaborated with a company called Monorail, and they had the hardware technology that helped us realise the vision for the project. BTG, they loaned us their wagons and they had faith in us from the start, which was so important. Peak Rail, a small heritage railway just in the middle of Derbyshire, for their huge patience and resources, getting the freight wagons to their track so that we could test there. And of course, to CPC for their help throughout the project. It's been an absolute privilege to be surrounded by so much expertise and innovation within our cohort, and we really do look forward to working further with the DFT to bring our product to market. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So the second winner of the Impactful Freight Award is Hypermile. Hypermile conducted a project that used artificial intelligence to support upskilling of heavy goods vehicle drivers and help them drive more energy efficiently. And the team have already gained evidence that the drivers liked using the system. It was intuitive and it says here, and ergonomic. We'll have discussions about not putting that in a sentence afterwards, but it was intuitive and easy to use, and showed that fuel savings of 6.8% could be achieved through its implementation. Now, let's just think about that. Fuel savings of 6.8% simply from changing the way that people received information as they were driving is an astonishing return and really, really impressive. Hypermile is currently in advanced discussions to bring pilot trials with 2 Tier 1 vehicle suppliers and will continue an existing commercial partnership. They're planning to raise a seed investment funding round in near future, hopefully leveraging their success in the TRIG project. Truck drivers are a real area of priority for the Department for Transport. We've seen the freight system being brought into sharp relief by supply chain disruption in recent years. And the profession is often dominated by older men who've been doing the job for 20 or more years. And what that means is that we're challenged in terms of introducing a new cohort and a new community into the world of heavy goods vehicle driving. And we need to disrupt that population. I was recently at a conversation with stakeholders associated with Eurotunnel, and they brought up exactly this challenge, that they cannot get enough drivers to be able to service the needs of the freight industry right now. So thinking about how we can modernize HGV driving, thinking about how we can think about making that task more comfortable and more attractive to a diverse population is so important in a role that underpins so much of our modern life. So I'm going to hand over now to Hypermile for a few words of acceptance.
We've got a video that Hypermile have sent in.
Brilliant.
We will play it in 1 second.
I'm really impressed.
My name is James Hennessy, and I'm the founder and the CEO of Hypermile. It's a great honour to receive this Chief Scientific Advisor Award for our work as part of the Future Freight programme. I'd like to thank Professor Sharples and the Department for Transport team for giving us this award. I'd also like to thank the Connected Places Catapult for their work in helping to facilitate the Department for Transport TRIG programme. I'd most importantly like to thank the Hypermile team, because it's their hard work in developing our intelligent driver platform that means we can receive the award, but also it's their hard work that means that we can reduce the carbon resulting from diesel commercial vehicles, but also helping battery electric trucks to go further. I know we're excited with the progress made thanks to this grant and excited to continue the development and bring the product to market. Thank you.
Brilliant. So the final award is for the innovative solution that we really felt emerged from the entirety of the TRIG programme. And you've actually already met the winner of this award because it's our colleague Donya from the University of Surrey. Donya, who you met on the panel earlier today, and her team have investigated railway bridge inspections in their TRIG project. And the project aimed to provide a mechanism for inspecting bridges by measuring the vibrations by a train's passage with onboard sensors. Now, you've probably seen the measurement trains that exist already and rove the network, and probably you're as excited as I am when you see one of those yellow trains as you are travelling on your journeys around the country. But the innovation that Donya and team have brought through is the complex data analysis and the models that let the data be interpreted. I remember in my conversations on a rail consortium about 12 to 15 years ago now, we were talking about the challenge that's presented with the sort of glut of data that new sensing technologies is providing to us. Turning that data into information and supporting decision-making on the basis of that data is a really, really tough challenge. And so the innovation that your team's presented is extremely important in the world of rail and in transport more generally. So the data-driven project made progress through both work on scale models and real-world data. Following completion of the project, the team were in conversation with Network Rail to further explore the opportunities of instigating their monitoring regimes. And the project has potential to reduce the need for maintenance visits to ageing rail infrastructure. Those visits are not only time-consuming, they can potentially disrupt the real operation of the railway, and if they involve people physically visiting those bits of infrastructure, they can present safety challenges as well. So there's a really important contribution that's being brought here. And of course, the goal that we're all working towards is moving from retrospective inspection to predictive maintenance regimes, and therefore being much more efficient in how we maintain our rail infrastructure across the UK, and providing therefore the resultant increase in network reliability. So I'm really happy to congratulate Donya and offer you the opportunity to give a few words of acceptance. Well done.
very much. I mean, we are truly, truly honoured to receive this award, and really surprised too. I mean, this project wouldn't have happened truly because if it wasn't for TRIG. And yes, it was a high-risk project, and we are truly grateful that you took a chance on us. I'd like to also thank you, Network Rail and Fugro, to trusting us with their data and their information. And I'd like to also thank you, my team, who really helped us in a short period of time to actually deliver what we promised to deliver. Thank you so very much.
Well done. So I'd just like to end by thanking all of our TRIG funding recipients and all of the winners. 2021 was a really great year for TRIG, and it is worth remembering that all of that work started when we were still in the midst of the pandemic, and so a lot of the communication, a lot of the planning and the work has had to be done under sometimes quite difficult circumstances as well. It doesn't say this on my piece of paper, but I would particularly like to thank James and Rosie and all of the others within DFT, and then the colleagues at the Connected Places Catapult. And I'm really sorry I don't have your names written down here, but I hope James will make sure we name you and thank you as well, because actually the work that goes into supporting the TRIG programme is absolutely tremendous. And we heard from the recipients today how important that is. So for me, TRIG is not at all just about getting the money out of the door and those awards of those sums of money. It's about the cohort effect. It's about the mentorship and the support that's given as part of the programme. And that couldn't be delivered without our colleagues from DFT and Connected Places Catapult. So I think we should give them a round of applause as well. Right.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Sarah. And yes, your thanks are very warmly received. So we've had our awards, and a big well done to all of our TRIG grant recipients this year and in the past. We're now going to move to our second panel session of today. I'd like to invite our panelists back onto the stage. If you'll all come up, please. And we're going to now talk about decarbonisation. So, as I think you'll probably all recognise, decarbonisation is it's the biggest technology challenge that DFT faces, and it's across all of our modes, all of the different sort of operational parts of the transport system, and it's of course not just us in transport, but it's the whole country, it's the whole economy, the whole energy system that faces this decarbonisation challenge. So I'm going to kick off with an open question to any of the panel who wish to pick it up, who are brave enough to go first. And it's what's the role of small organisations, SMEs, potentially teams of universities, innovators on their own in their sheds? What's their role in the decarbonisation challenge? Who'd like to go first? Go on, Will.
I'll go first. To lead it. We were talking earlier about the big businesses that are stuck in inertia, and that's true, that all that needs to come from elsewhere. Yes, it gets carried on by the big businesses, but it comes from the innovators, the smaller to mediums, and the academics. That's where it comes from.
Great answer. James, you look like you want to say something.
It's so true. It's the ability to recognise what's good, what's working, pivot, change, and do all the things you can do in an SME that you can't do when you're in a big corporate. And that's not to say the big corporate doesn't have the place to play in that journey. It's almost impossible, though, to move a big corporate from its trajectory in days and weeks. It takes months and years, whereas for ourselves, we go in and go, actually, guys, I think we've got this the wrong size. We need to make it bigger. Is a decision that's made on the spot almost. And that's fantastic to see that innovation coming to light.
Thank you. Anyone else like to come in on that? Oh, Donya, yes, please.
I think it's also recognising that it's not just the top-down approach of innovation, but actually the bottom-up approach, the behavioural change, understanding the psychology of change and how that change happens, because there is a huge amount of the kind of utilisation, the true impact happens when actually people use the technology, use the innovation, or understand innovation. Which I think is perhaps is the area that is now being recognised and is being used. But yeah.
Thank you. And I think we talked about little littler organizations, but also the bigger organizations have got to set the challenges, right? Because that helps lead the way, and that's a role for government. For our government stakeholders at the end, do you think we should be doing more? Is there more we can do to set the challenge?
I think one of the things that I've realised is that actually it's not at all obvious in the outside world what the challenges that government departments like Department for Transport actually have as their priorities. One of the bits of work that we've led since I joined the department is an articulation of priority research questions. And that may sound really obvious, but actually it's proved to be an extremely important tool to communicate to the outside world that these are our priority challenges. So we've articulated them around the 4 of the strategic priorities for the Department for Transport around reducing environmental impact, improving transport for the user, growing and levelling up the economy, and international impact as well. And by building those priority research questions, which took about 6 months of work of collaboration between the science team and the relevant policy teams, we've now got what I hope ends up being a living document that helps us to communicate what happens and what the priorities are from a government department point of view to the outside world. I hadn't appreciated how valuable that communication tool would be. We're holding an event with academic collaborators in November. And, I can say as an academic, they're not always the quickest to respond to emails and sign up for things. And when we said, this is what we're doing, we're bringing our groups of academic consortia together, we're going to talk about our priorities, we're going to lead discussions. We got, I think within 2 days, 84 people sign up. And that was astonishing. So I think that recognizing the value of communicating what those of us immersed in that world really understand, but communicating it in simple terms externally, I think can be really, really helpful. It can also provide that confidence that actually the good idea you've had is sort of in line with government priorities. But Eamon, I don't know if you want to comment from a policy point of view, because I think in the same way as talking about R&D priorities, there are some things we can signal from a policy perspective.
I wouldn't add too much. I think Sarah's dead right there. I think it's us being very clear about the outcome that we want. And we don't want to be too prescriptive in how you get there. I think that's where the innovation is. If we as policymakers say, well, this is what we want to achieve and by when, and set some parameters around that, but we don't want to be too prescriptive. Certainly in maritime, we're technology agnostic in many respects. So we don't specify, right, we're only going to fund hydrogen, or we're only going to fund electric boats or whatever. Where what we do is we set the target, and this is the outcome that we're seeking, and then we feed that through into the criteria of our competitions and everything else. I think that's really key. Yeah.
But as a policy team or a policy owner, we need to get those signals in from outside, don't we? And that's a barrier, right? Like how do you know which signals to sort of focus on? How do you know who to listen to?
Engagement is really key. And I think we're lucky in the maritime bit of DFT to have a really good relationship with the sector. And we have a really good relationship with people like Innovate UK and Catapults, not just this one, but Ori, for example, who are closer to the SMEs and closer to industry. And we spend an awful lot of time with those. So there's that informal engagement, continuous. But we also have things like an expert panel. We have like our Clean Maritime Council, and they're partners and stakeholders from across the sector that can challenge us and say, well, you've not quite got that bit right, or actually, is that the right challenge that you're designing into your subsequent competition? So I think both formal and informal allows us to make sure we're shaping the right competitions.
And I think in complement to that as well, we've got our Science Advisory Council that's made up of independent academic experts whose job is almost to independently challenge me in my independent challenge role of the department. And so those academics who are the people who are working on the ground at probably some of the lower technology readiness level challenges are also a really important feed through, and hopefully help the department not only solve the challenges that we're dealing with now, but provide a really clear view as to the pathway towards those future scenarios and those future challenges as well.
Thank you. For our innovators, looking from the other side and trying to talk to government, do you think you could comment on how that works, or how we could improve that, and how that could then support decarbonisation, perhaps?
It's the fact that it has to be problem-led. We shouldn't be trying to find solutions to problems that don't exist. Policy's driving that, clearly within decarbonisation. But I do think it'd be something that we're quite passionate about is the openness in terms of how you address that challenge. And it's very much, an example that we're using is, don't send a ship to go and take men out to a wind farm to go and maintain the wind farm. Put some comms out there and then use a drone, which actually is no longer a maritime challenge, but actually it is a maritime challenge. And how is the decarbonisation actually met? And it's almost, for us, it's addressing that whole, where's the problem solution, and being almost agnostic in where the solution comes from, and being very problem focused.
I'm thinking, I'm struggling. I think the policies being set out there are great. What tends to confuse the issue is that often through different competitions, the objective changes slightly, and so you might have a fantastic idea for decarbonisation, but it doesn't quite fit any of the competitions that are out there, and so that's probably the one area that I would say could be altered slightly.
Does that bring us back maybe to that sort of small corners? Because there are some big and obvious challenges in decarbonisation, like cars, for example. And then there's lots and lots of different corners, like the work boats that we were talking about earlier. So maybe that's something for us to go away and kind of maybe think more systematically and look for those little corners. Were you going to come in, Donia?
I can do, yeah. So I do find the policies and also the communication of the challenges that exist, and this is not only kind of overarching challenges, but actually specific challenges for some of the, the stakeholders, likes of Network Rail, likes of the National Highways. It's very useful in us, especially coming from academia background, understanding what actually is a challenge, because sometimes it is very easy for academics to sit, by their desk and think of the challenge from their point of view, but it wouldn't necessarily be the challenge that actually matters the most. The other valuable thing is we sometimes work on so many different solutions that are actually quite transferable and interoperable. So it is possible to actually apply a certain solution to another challenge, which originally wasn't developed for that. So having that communication of those specific areas that need some thinking, some innovation, actually is quite powerful. What we do find powerful.
I think it's often easy for us in government to forget how privileged our viewpoint and our knowledge is. And we expect other people to see it in the same way and just sort of know that that's a challenge, know that that's a problem. But so maybe there is more than we could do to really sort of express that and do it systematically and clearly. Unless anyone wants to comment more on the specifics of this question, I might move on to our next question. So this is directed initially to Eamon and Sarah. So what do you think are the key interventions that will help us reach net zero by 2050? What do you think we need to be focusing on?
Okay, do you want me to try and go first? So we need to have a good and clear understanding of the potential pathways for some of the energy solutions that will deliver future transport. So at the moment, we've obviously got a number of different technologies that might deliver the pathway in different parts of the transport system. For automotive vehicles, we've got strong signals and strong evidence that battery electric is going to be the solution that will deliver the outcomes that we need. But for heavy goods vehicles, for maritime and for aviation, there's a much less clear pathway. And so other solutions come into play, such as for aviation, sustainable aviation fuels, for maritime, the opportunities around hydrogen and ammonia, for heavy goods vehicles, hydrogen fuel cells as well. All of those technologies need to develop effectively if we're going to meet our net zero targets. And that's very clearly stated in the Transport Decarbonisation Plan, the Jet Zero strategy, that there are technology assumptions that always have to be built in, and those have associated uncertainty. So one of the things I think we really need to make sure is supported is some of the really fundamental work that will provide the breakthrough in battery technologies, will help to deliver that efficiency that we believe is potentially there from hydrogen. But we also need to understand how these technologies work in practice. And I'm going to go back to Eamon's really great example of the cable earlier. One of the things that we're funding within the department are real-world demonstrations. And those real-world demonstrations, I think, are sometimes misconstrued as being there purely to give industry confidence and support for the investment. Well, no, they're research, development, and demonstration. Because what we learn when we deploy these technologies in anger in a real-world situation is hugely valuable. And what it might come down to is, if we're using more electric vehicles as opposed to diesel on construction sites, understanding what the nuances are about the need then to get the battery capability and the local power networks in a place that they can deliver the electricity that's required, for example. It might tell us about the training that's required for the operators. If we're thinking about maritime, it might tell us about the infrastructure that's needed at ports. We need to understand whether we can have co-located technologies in an aviation setting. And we need to understand the interactions between not only different parts of our transport systems, but the other parts of the energy system that are really, really important to deliver. We're only going to learn those complex outcomes and those complex issues if we demonstrate these technologies in situ. So it's at all ends of the technology readiness levels. It's that fundamental breakthrough technology, but it's also understanding what the practicalities of deploying these technologies in the real world are.
So just a couple of things then.
Just a few, yeah.
Eamon, is there anything you'd like to add to that from a sort of maritime viewpoint?
I think a fairly similar, position actually. With maritime in mind, I think the challenge we've got is there's not going to be one solution to decarbonise maritime, because it's so diverse in its operations and its vessel type. And you have domestic, and you've got inland waterways, and you've got international shipping, and I think the challenge actually, but however, there is some research done at UCL, for example, on international shipping that says, well, the technology will be in place and will be there in order to decarbonise international shipping. The challenge is the wider system. It's if you've got a ship that is using ammonia, for example, then internationally, we don't want to be in the position in the UK of taking a UK-only position where we've gone hydrogen and that ship can't berth. No, it's things like that. Yeah. When you come to talk about these little workboats on the wind farms, then it's actually the technology on the boats, the batteries and things like that is probably the easiest bit, honestly. I think it's the wind turbine infrastructure, it's the infrastructure at the port, it's getting the electricity to the port, which can sometimes be in a really remote location. Look at the Shetland Islands today and the challenges they've got there. It's the regulation around, well, all these different types of, but I can imagine a world where you've got bigger ports that have a hydrogen tank next to some ammonia, next to some electricity charging points, next to a massive grid for shore power. And, you've got all the regulations don't exist for that at the moment. So there's a regulation challenge here. So I think actually the biggest thing that is going to make all of this work, it's a systems problem. It's not an individual technology problem.
I'm going to jump in here because I'm also a professor in human factors. And one of the things I talk about is we always have people and technology, and what we talk about as artifacts, the physical things around us that combine to deliver that complex system. All of the things that Eamon just talked about involves changing the way that people then interact with those systems. And it might be the way that people pilot or control vessels. It might be the way that we conduct maintenance operations. It might be the way that we build the infrastructure. So the skills challenge to take people along with the net zero innovations is really, really important. And whilst I made a flippant comment about using the word ergonomic in as an adjective, actually, we need to make sure that we are considering the needs of people within all parts of the system. I don't get concerned about automation and its impact on people, because what automation will do is change the role of people within our transport systems. And so we just need to acknowledge that and make sure that we bring people with us. And I can see Jamie in the corner is probably going, woohoo, for human factors. But actually it's really, really important part of the process. So we mustn't get too seduced by the technologies without remembering the importance of having those skills of people who can understand and elicit the needs of people in these systems at the same time.
Yeah, I think it's always the lesson, always the thing that us techies have to keep in mind is there's a person in any system somewhere. Would innovators like to come in? James, I think you're looking eager.
I loved Eamon's comment around the infrastructure being so critical into the maritime sector. May I ask a question for Eamon?
Oh, no.
How best do you feel we can accelerate the adoption of new infrastructure in the maritime sector?
That's quite a loaded question, because I think there's lots of different facets to this. I think there's probably, let's take shore power, and this is where vessels coming into port, we got to plug in to run their auxiliary systems while they're berthed. There's loads of challenges there, and I think one of them is probably the cost. You know, if you're Southampton Port told me that a cruise ship plugged in is the equivalent in Southampton is the equivalent of 4 Stansteads. Now, if on a Thursday during the summer they've got 5 plugged in, then that is 20 Stansteads worth of electricity that they require at a certain point on a Saturday. Now that's huge. So you've got a grid problem. So I think there's the regulations don't necessarily exist for that. There's an energy generation question. There is a grid question about actually supplying all of that. So I think it's a multifaceted challenge, and I think at the heart of it, it comes back to what you were talking about earlier about investment on some bits, but it also requires quite a lot of policy and regulation from government to make that work as well. And then you've got all the R&D actually when it comes to things like standards and electricity charges, and you know, I've been through all of that with cars. Dread to think what it's going to be like with boats.
And I think there's definitely that direction of travel where in DFT we're having to start thinking about the transport system as an energy system. Absolutely. And you're talking about shore power in Southampton. So Heathrow is 0.9 gigawatts of kerosene it draws all day, every day, on average, over a year. So that's a power station on its own. Yeah. And so there's a lot of challenges. It's
interesting. Sorry, I don't want to dominate the question, but it's interesting. Ports, I think, are now thinking that way as well. And actually, I was talking to Shore and Port a few months ago, and they are thinking of themselves more and more as a hydrogen hub. So not just there for the parking of boats and offloading freight and wood that travels to IKEA and things like that, but they are thinking more about, well, we've got freight coming in, and how can they use, you know, if we had a hydrogen facility, then actually we would then become a centre for not just the vessels, but all the vessels, vehicles that come into it and everything else. So it's really interesting. There's a bit of a mind change and a systems change in the sector.
Yeah, just to add to that point, like we have been working on ZEFI project last year.
Can I give you a mic? Sorry, we've got a question from the audience.
No, it's not a question. I just want to add the similar thing. So we have been working on a ZEFI project, and we have been doing the case studies for different airports. So Bristol is one which we visited, and they are looking on the similar terms, being a hydrogen hub going forward.
Yeah. Thank you. Donia, Will, would you like to come in at all on the sort of the we've gone big picture on decarbonisation?
Just a quick one, going back on the systems thinking and systemic thinking. I think, especially in my background, civil engineering, we haven't been very well trained to actually think of the whole life cycle. Now we are changing. It's about, when we're thinking of innovation, it's not just now, it's actually how is that changing, how is that evolving, and how would answer future solutions. So anticipating future problems and challenges for that particular innovation. So batteries are a good example of all the EV vehicles now that exist, and the batteries for these vehicles. Because they're young, we still don't know how they will age. When they age, what do we do with them? And it's not just the EVs, all the new infrastructure, which wind turbines, for example, we still don't have that full picture of their whole life cycle. And I think that thinking in the entire design situation, in the design process of any innovation is actually quite key and powerful in how that innovation is implemented.
Yeah. And it reflects the pace of the change that we need, because 2050 sounds quite far away, but actually it's very, very close. So lots of the changes we're going to need to drive will need to happen at a much faster rate than they would organically or in a market-driven way. So yeah, very, very big challenge.
Yeah, just to slightly going back to the start of that, rather than the technologies themselves, but the way that, for example, what is these new innovations? What is going to power these things? And actually, the process of getting to that answer of what it is a collaborative thing, because if you leave it to one body, one industry, one person to decide, you'll get their message. And I think that's the joy of these small, bringing it back to TRIG, it's the joy of these small things, is that actually getting small to medium enterprises to work together collaboratively can get a much better solution, can get a suitable solution. And
amen to that, I'd say. I think I'm going to draw us to a close now. I might give Eamon just a second to say one last word on maritime decarbonisation as our sort of decarb leader here. Is there any final thing you'd like to say, Eamon?
I'm going to use one word. I'm just going to say exciting.
I think it's a great point to finish on. So I'm gonna let Sarah wrap up today, but just one final massive thank you for me, for everyone who's watching, everyone who took part today, and everyone who's here live. Sarah.
You've not heard enough from me already today, so it's good that I've got some words in. I'd like to say a massive thank you, and I've already said thank you to those who've led the TRIG competition. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to all of you, whether you're attending online or physically in the room. I think there's a really important lesson from today and the discussions we've had, and I've sort of been doing a little bit of thinking while I was sort of sitting there on the panel. I think we need to make sure we make time for these conversations. I've learned a tremendous amount in the last, sort of hour and 3/4. And the reason I've learned so much is that we've got real diversity in this room in terms of the different experience that we all bring to the challenges that we're having to tackle together. One of the dangers of the pace of change that we're all experiencing now is we don't make enough time to sit and have these conversations. And I'm probably one of the worst culprits in this, in that I don't know what your diary looks like, but mine doesn't have many gaps in it. So I think the lesson for all of us is to recognise that we need time if we're going to change and innovate in our transport system. So, you know, there's a rule for all of us, isn't there, to listen to each other's views and thoughts, make sure we build in those opportunities to challenge our conventional thinking, and make sure as well that we're all keeping our doors open. We are, and I've been, you know, I love this job that I do as Chief Scientific Advisor, because what I found is a department that's absolutely willing to be challenged, absolutely willing to listen, works its socks off in terms of delivering the policy and the delivery of programs that is needed right now in our transport system, but also is making the time to think about the future as well. And so I'd really just commend that to all of you, but make sure that we all take away a little bit of a mission to just take time to think and have these conversations, because that's what delivers innovation, and we need that innovation if we're going to tackle the problems and the challenges and the opportunities that the transport system presents to us for the future. So thank you all very much.
Awesome.